Have you ever walked into a place and felt like something was wrong? Like you couldn't quite put your finger on it, but the air felt heavier, the shadows darker, and the silence more suffocating. That's how I felt the moment I stepped into the room 209 at the Blackstone Hotel. It's a place that's been around for decades, a relic from another time, with its faded velvet wallpaper, creaky wooden floors, and old brass chandeliers that seem to sigh with age. The kind of hotel you'd expect to see in an old, forgotten town. A place that once may have been bustling with life, but now is a shadow of what it once was. The halls smell of stale perfume and dust, and the rooms, though still operational, feel trapped in the past. It's not the kind of hotel you typically want to visit, let alone stay in, but I was desperate. I had been driving for hours, and by the time I pulled up to the Blackstone, it was nearly midnight. My car had broken down on the side of the road, and the town was so small, there weren't many options for lodging. I had no choice but to take what I could get. When I entered the lobby, I was greeted by a woman who looked like she belonged in another era. She was dressed in a vintage, old-fashioned hotel uniform, the kind you'd see in photos from the early 1900s. Her hair was pinned up neatly, and her eyes, they had this strange, distant look to them, almost like she wasn't fully there. She smiled as she handed me the key, and I couldn't help but notice the strange chill in her gaze. "Room 209, she said, her voice too soft, almost a whisper. "You'll be comfortable there." But there was something about her tone, like she was trying to tell me something without saying it outright. A warning, maybe? Or a plea for me to leave. I took the key, thanked her, and went up the stairs to my room. The hotel had an eerie quietness to it, the kind that makes every step sound louder than it really is. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting someone, or something, to be following me, but no one was there. It felt like I was walking through a ghost town. When I reached room 209, I noticed immediately that the door was slightly ajar. I assumed the cleaning staff had forgotten to lock it, so I pushed it open fully. That's when I felt it. A coldness in the air, like a draft was creeping in from somewhere, though there were no windows open. The light overhead flickered briefly before it steadied, casting a dull yellow glow across the room. I stepped inside. The room was strange. It was furnished like any other hotel room, with a large, iron-framed bed covered in a faded floral quilt, a worn armchair by the window, and a dresser with a cracked mirror. But there was an unnatural stillness to it. The bed didn't look like it had been slept in, but there was something unsettling about the way the sheets were arranged, as if someone had been in the middle of making the bed, but had stopped halfway through. I placed my bag on the dresser, but the room felt off, like the walls were closing in. I had stayed in dozens of hotels before, but this one felt different. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and for a moment I thought I saw a shadow shift across the far corner of the room. But when I turned, there was nothing there, just an old, empty chair facing the window. I shook my head, trying to brush it off. I was just tired, too tired to think straight. So I locked the door behind me, threw the deadbolt, and went into the bathroom to freshen up. As I washed my face, I glanced into the mirror, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing just behind me, a man, or at least I thought it was. He was tall, dressed in a tattered suit, his face pale and lifeless, eyes hollow. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. I spun around. Nothing. I was alone. But I wasn't. I could feel it. That presence, that weight pressing down on me. Something wasn't right with this room. Something had happened here. A long time ago, maybe. But the scars remained. I could feel it in the air, like the room had been stained by something dark. I forced myself to shake it off. It was late. I needed rest. I climbed into bed, hoping that sleep would clear my mind. But the moment my head hit the pillow, a low, distant sound echoed through the room. A tapping, soft at first, almost imperceptible, like a finger gently drumming against the wood. But it grew louder, more deliberate. It wasn't coming from the walls or the windows. It was coming from inside the room. I held my breath, straining to listen. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the corner of the room, the same corner I had seen that shadow earlier. My pulse quickened as I slowly turned my head toward it, but the corner was empty. The air grew colder still. My breath came out in clouds, even though the radiator had been running. There was no reason for it to be so freezing in here. The tapping continued, like it was coming from beneath the floorboards, or from inside the walls themselves. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as the noise escalated, becoming frantic, desperate. Then, suddenly, it stopped, and that's when I heard it. A whisper, soft but unmistakable. "Help me!" It came from the corner. I could hear it clear as day, like it was right next to me. The voice was raspy, filled with pain, as though it had been trapped here for years, maybe decades. I froze, unable to move, unable to speak. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls closing tighter with every passing second. "Help me!" I couldn't take it any longer. I threw the covers off and bolted for the door, but when I reached for the handle, it wouldn't open. My heart raced as I twisted it again, harder this time, but the door wouldn't budge. I turned to look back at the room. The figure was there again, standing by the window. His face was no longer a blur, but a grotesque, hollow mask. His eyes locked onto mine, empty and dark, his mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. "You can't leave," he whispered, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. The room grew colder, and for the first time, I realised I wasn't alone. Not in the way I had thought. There was something in room 209, something angry, and it didn't want me to leave. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him, this pale, gaunt figure standing by the window. His presence felt like it was pulling me in, his hollow gaze suffocating any rational thought. The whisper continued to echo in the back of my mind. "You can't leave." I backed away slowly, my fingers still gripping the doorknob, trying to force it open, but it felt like the metal was freezing, resistant to my touch. Every inch I moved felt like I was being drawn deeper into the room, trapped, helpless. The figure didn't move, but the air around me grew heavier, denser. The temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath now, hanging in the air like mist. I could feel something brush against the back of my neck, cold fingers, or maybe the sensation of invisible hands reaching for me. It was suffocating, this sense of being surrounded, of being watched by unseen eyes. I turned my gaze back to the figure. His smile, if you could even call it that, twisted and elongated, stretching wider and wider until it seemed to consume half of his face. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "We've been waiting for someone like you." I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, and no matter how hard I tried to scream, no sound came out. I was trapped in this room, suffocated by its oppressive energy. The figure's eyes never left me as he slowly, almost imperceptibly, lifted his hand. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I knew, deep down, that if he touched me, if I let him get any closer, something terrible would happen. But the door, it was still locked, and I couldn't break free. His voice pierced the silence once more. "You will never leave." Suddenly, the walls around me seemed to groan, like the very structure of the hotel was alive. The floor beneath me cracked, and I felt a violent shift in the air. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, and the world around me seemed to blur. Everything shaking, everything moving at once. I couldn't keep my balance. My feet slid across the floor, and I fell back onto the bed. I heard a low, guttural growl coming from somewhere deep within the walls of the room. The bed beneath me trembled, as if something was crawling beneath it. Panic surged through me, but my body remained paralyzed, like the fear had locked me in place. The figure was now standing at the foot of the bed, his grin wider than before, more grotesque. His eyes were black, endless voids that seemed to pull everything into them. He stepped closer, his feet making no sound against the floor, as though he were walking in water. I could barely breathe. "What do you want from me?" I managed to croak, my voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out with his hand, and for the first time, I felt a coldness in the room that wasn't just the temperature. It was an ice-cold chill that gnawed at my bones, freezing the air itself. "I want you to understand," he said. "I want you to understand why they never leave this room, why they never leave this hotel." Before I could process his words, the world around me changed. The walls of the room shifted. The bed, once firm beneath me, was now a sinking pit, swallowing me whole. I felt like I was being pulled into the mattress, the sheets wrapping around my legs like cold, dead hands. The lights flickered violently, casting eerie shadows across the room, and I thought I saw fleeting figures moving in and out of the corners, like ghosts, or memories, or something worse. I screamed, but it was swallowed by the relentless darkness. In a sudden flash, I was no longer alone. Figures appeared all around me, materializing from the shadows. Pale faces, hollow eyes, faces twisted in silent agony. Their mouths moved in unison, but no sound came from their lips. "Help me! I'm trapped! Don't stay!" The voices came from everywhere. There were dozens of them, all of them begging for release, but all of them bound to this room, bound to this hotel. I could feel the overwhelming sense of despair, of hopelessness. They were trapped in this place, caught between this world and the next. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the weight of their presence. The figure by the window stepped forward, his grin never wavering. "This is your fate now too," he whispered, his voice like ice scraping against metal. "Once you're in, you can never leave." With a sudden, jarring motion, the room snapped back to normal. The figures vanished, the oppressive weight lifted, and I was alone again. But the air was still thick, heavy with the echoes of their voices. I was gasping for breath, my heart racing in my chest. I couldn't understand what was happening. What had I walked into? Was this real? Was I losing my mind? The question burned in my mind, but didn't have time to find the answers. All I knew was that I had to get out. I had to escape this place before it consumed me like it had consumed so many others. I grabbed for the door again, and this time it opened. The hallway beyond the door was dark and empty. No one was there. the hotel was silent, but the feeling that something was watching me didn't fade. It was still there, lingering behind me, suffocating me with its presence. I fled down the hall, not daring to look back. I was running now, my footsteps echoing off the old wooden floorboards, reverberating in the empty, dark hall. But the deeper I ran, the more I felt it. The cold, creeping sensation that I wasn't alone, that the shadows themselves were closing in on me. Finally, I burst out the front door of the hotel, gasping for air. I was outside. The fresh night air hit me like a wave, but it did nothing to shake the terror that gripped me. I looked back at the hotel, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The Blackstone Hotel loomed before me, an old, crumbling relic of another time. But its windows, those windows, looked different now. They were dark, like empty eyes staring out into the night. I could have sworn I saw the movement inside, but there was something else. I looked at the door to room 209. It was wide open, and behind it I saw something I'll never forget. A figure, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes, standing just inside, waiting for me. I turned and ran, and I didn't stop.